"Why didn't you let me die?" she whispered, and the cowboy realized what she'd suffered. Life had taught him to rely only on himself. The town was a few miles back, and he had made a quick stop to pick up supplies, though he rarely went there anymore. Tonight, though, something felt different. He couldn't say why, but the air carried a strange weight, as if the darkness itself had secrets. Ethan's boots crunched against the frost-hardened dirt. His eyes, sharp and steady, scanned the road ahead. He noticed a glimmer, a reflection of moonlight on something off the side of the path. At first he thought it might be a puddle, but as he rode closer he saw a car, its front smashed against a tree. Smoke curled from the hood, faint but worrying. The vehicle looked abandoned, yet there was a faint movement inside. Ethan's heart tightened. He was not a man who sought trouble, but he couldn't ride past someone in need. Dismounting, he approached cautiously. The car's door was partially open, and inside, slumped in the driver's seat, was a young woman. Her hair was tangled, her face pale, and she was covered in dirt and dried blood. Her breathing was shallow. Something inside Ethan stirred, not just concern, but a deep sense of responsibility. He spoke softly, though he knew she might not hear him. "Ma'am, can you hear me? I'm here to help." She had been through something terrible, and though he didn't know the full story yet, he knew she was alive and needed help. He pulled off his coat and carefully wrapped it around her shoulders. His hands were steady, gentle, and careful not to hurt her more than she already was. With a strength that surprised even him, he lifted her from the car, feeling her small, fragile frame against him. She didn't fight, didn't resist. She only stared straight ahead as if she had given up expecting help. Ethan carried her to his truck, loading her in the back where blankets and supplies were kept. He wrapped her in warmth, making sure her head was supported. He started the engine, the rumble breaking the silence of the night, and drove carefully toward the nearest clinic. The road was rough, the tires crunching over rocks and frozen dirt, but he drove steadily, refusing to let panic take over. All the way, the young woman remained silent. Her eyes were open, wide and dark, staring blankly at the ceiling of the truck. Ethan stole glances at her, feeling an unusual mix of curiosity and protectiveness. Something about her presence felt heavy, as though she carried the weight of the world in her small body. He couldn't ignore the bruises and scars that ran along her arms, signs of pain he could not begin to imagine. When he finally reached the clinic, the staff were startled to see the state of the young woman. They rushed her inside, but Ethan stayed close. He gave a brief explanation, keeping it simple. She had been in a car accident, but there was more to it, something darker hidden beneath her injuries. The doctors nodded, and he allowed himself to breathe a little easier. As he waited in the quiet hallway, Ethan felt the strange sensation of worry gnawing at him. It wasn't just concern for her body, it was something deeper, something that told him this young woman had been through horrors he couldn't yet name. He had seen suffering in his time, losses on the ranch, accidents in town, but this felt different. There was a pain in her eyes that spoke of more than a single night or accident. Hours passed. Finally, a doctor approached him, a young woman with kind eyes. "She's stable," she said softly. "Physically, she will recover, but emotionally, she's been through a lot. I think she needs more than just medicine." He returned to his truck, thinking about the young woman. He didn't know her name, didn't know her story, but a sense of responsibility had planted itself firmly in his chest. He could not abandon her, not now. Not when she had come so close to something he dared not name aloud. By dawn, he decided to bring her to his ranch. It was a small place, modest and quiet, but it was safe, and it was far from the roads and the world that had hurt her. He imagined her waking in the safety of familiar woods, the sound of horses, the smell of hay and earth. Maybe there she could begin to breathe again. He returned to the clinic and insisted gently that she stay with him while she healed. The nurses hesitated, noting his age and the simplicity of his life. Yet they could see his determination, the quiet strength in his eyes, and they relented. The ride back to the ranch was different from the drive to the clinic. Ethan spoke softly to her, telling her small things about the land, the horses, and the quiet of the morning. She didn't respond, not with words, but she listened. That small acknowledgement gave him hope. At the ranch, he led her to a guest room he had prepared. The room was modest, clean sheets, a warm blanket, a simple lamp casting a soft glow. He helped her settle in, letting her rest while he went to feed the animals and check the fences. Even in the work he loved, he couldn't stop thinking about her. She had survived something unimaginable, yet she looked almost defeated, as if life itself had grown too heavy to carry. Hours later, he returned to the house, finding her awake. Her eyes met his, wide and frightened. She said nothing, only watched. He realized in that moment that words could not reach her yet. Actions mattered more than promises. Safety, care, and presence were the first steps toward trust. That night, as he watched the fire in the hearth, Ethan thought about the life that had led him here. He had lived simply, quietly, avoiding attachments and people. But this young woman had crossed his path, broken and fragile, and he could not ignore her. Something deep inside him stirred, a need to protect, to care, and perhaps, in some quiet way, to redeem something he had lost long ago. He left her to rest, giving her space but staying nearby. He could hear the soft rhythm of her breathing, shallow and uneven, and he knew sleep was difficult, not just tonight but perhaps for many nights to come. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "You're safe now, you're not alone." Ethan Hale, the quiet cowboy of the hills, had never imagined that life would place someone in his path who carried such silent suffering. But here she was, and he could not turn away. Not now, not ever. And in the silence of that cold, quiet night, with only the wind rustling through the trees and the fire casting flickering shadows on the walls, the first fragile thread of trust began to form. It was tiny, almost invisible, but it existed. And for the first time, Ethan felt that maybe, just maybe, saving someone else might save a part of himself too. The first morning at the ranch arrived quietly. The sun spilled pale light over the rolling hills, turning the frost into tiny diamonds that sparkled in the early rays. Ethan moved around the house in his usual calm way, making coffee, feeding the horses, and checking the fences. The young woman, Lena, remained in the guest room, her face pale and her eyes wide with caution. She had not spoken since the night before. Her silence was heavy, and Ethan could feel it pressing on him, yet he understood. He placed a warm plate of breakfast near the bed and knocked softly on the door. "Morning," he said gently. "I brought you some food. You don't have to eat if you're not ready, but it's here." It had to be earned slowly, piece by piece. Ethan went about his chores, listening to the soft sounds of the ranch waking up. The horses nickering, the wind brushing through the tall grass, and the distant crows calling to one another. Everything seemed normal, but he knew normal had little meaning for her. The road she had come from, the city, or wherever she had been filled with fear and pain. Her body carried the evidence, but her eyes told the story her lips refused to speak. Hours passed. Ethan returned to check on her, finding her sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. He sat down quietly in a chair across the room, giving her space. "You don't have to talk," he said softly. "I'm just here if you need anything." People who had suffered so much that they had built walls around themselves. It was clear she had been through more than just the accident. By mid-morning, Ethan decided she needed fresh air. He gently suggested a walk outside. "The sun is out," he said. "Sometimes it helps to breathe the fresh air. You don't have to go far." For a while there was no conversation, just the sound of the wind and the quiet rhythm of her footsteps. Slowly, though, she began to speak in small fragments. It's quiet here," she said. Her voice was barely audible. "Yes," Ethan replied. "Quiet can be good sometimes. It lets you hear yourself think. It lets you heal." Ethan realized that while the land was peaceful, her mind was anything but. Every quiet moment might have reminded her of memories she did not want to face. Every gentle gesture could feel like a threat. The scars she carried were not just on her body, they were etched into her soul. Days passed in a similar rhythm. Ethan gave her tasks she could handle, feeding a calf, brushing the horses, sweeping the porch. He didn't speak much, only guiding when necessary. Slowly, Lena began to respond to the routine. She started to eat a little, and some mornings she even sat outside for longer stretches. Yet despite these small signs of progress, there was always a tension, a shadow lingering over her. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, Lena woke screaming. Ethan, who had been in the kitchen, rushed to her room. She was thrashing on the bed, her face contorted with fear. "Shh, it's okay," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You're safe. You're here, and no one can hurt you now." Then in a barely audible whisper, she said the words that would haunt Ethan. "Why didn't you let me die?" She wanted to explain, but the words were trapped somewhere deep inside her. Ethan did not push. He waited, simply sitting there, letting her feel the safety of his presence. Over the next days, Ethan began to notice more signs of her suffering. She flinched at sudden noises, hesitated when anyone approached her, and sometimes withdrew for hours at a time. He could see the old bruises on her arms and scars that told stories he did not want to imagine. She had been through more than most people could survive, yet here she was, fragile but alive. One morning, while he was brushing the horses, she came out quietly and stood nearby, watching him. He did not look up, only continued his work, letting her presence settle around him. After a long moment, she spoke softly. "Do you ever feel like the world is too heavy?" Slowly, she began to realize that someone could care without judging, that someone could protect her without trying to control her. For the first time in a long while, she felt a small, cautious spark of safety. Ethan, for his part, was learning too. He had always been a quiet man, living with his own regrets and failures. But helping Lena, being present without demanding anything, made him feel a purpose he had not known he needed. He understood that healing was not a straight path, that trust could not be forced, and that sometimes the best thing a person could do was simply be there. Evenings became a time of quiet companionship. Ethan would sit by the fire, reading a book or repairing tools, while Lena quietly did her own things. She began to talk in small pieces, about the weather, about the animals, about moments of beauty she had seen before the darkness took over. These fragments were small, but they were victories. Each word, each sentence was a step toward healing. Yet, the shadows of her past were never far away. Some nights she would wake trembling, haunted by memories she could not speak aloud. Ethan would stay beside her, offering nothing but presence and patience. He knew that the road ahead would be long, that trust and healing were processes that could not be rushed. One afternoon, as they worked in the barn together, Lena finally asked something more personal. "Why are you helping me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan paused, leaning on the broom. "Because I can," he said simply. "Because you deserve a chance to be safe. That's all the reason I need." It was not much, but it was progress. She was beginning to understand that someone could care for her without expecting anything in return, that kindness did not always come with strings attached. By the end of the week, Lena's body began to show signs of recovery. Her wounds were healing, her strength returning. Yet Ethan knew that physical recovery was only one part of the journey. The deeper pain, the fear, and the memories she carried would take much longer to heal. He could not fix her past, but he could offer her a present where she could feel safe, and maybe, eventually, begin to hope for a future. And so life at the ranch settled into a quiet rhythm. The sun rose and set, the wind whispered through the grass, and slowly, ever so slowly, Lena began to trust that she could exist in a world without immediate danger. She began to see that someone could care for her without hurting her, that survival did not have to feel like punishment. Ethan watched her with a careful eye, knowing that the journey ahead would be long and filled with challenges. But he also knew something else, that this small, fragile young woman had survived something unimaginable, and that in itself was a testament to her strength. And in those quiet moments, when the world seemed far away and only the soft sounds of the ranch remained, a fragile connection began to form between them. A connection built not on words, not on promises, but on the simple truth that she was alive, and he had chosen to be there with her. The mornings at the ranch had started to feel less frightening for Lena, though the fear was still there, like a shadow following her wherever she went. Each day she spent with Ethan, she felt a little safer, a little stronger, but some memories refused to leave her alone. It was as if the past had wrapped itself around her like chains, invisible but heavy, and she did not know how to shake them off. Ethan had grown accustomed to her silence. He did not ask questions she was not ready to answer. Instead, he offered the small routines of ranch life, feeding the horses, mending fences, gathering eggs from the chicken coop. These tasks were simple, yet they gave her something to focus on besides the pain she carried inside. Sometimes she would work in silence while he did his own chores nearby. Occasionally she would glance at him, and for a brief moment their eyes would meet, a silent acknowledgement of trust slowly forming. One afternoon, the sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden light over the ranch. Ethan was tending to the barn when he heard Lena speaking softly to herself. He paused, unsure if he should intervene. Her voice trembled and he could hear the sadness in her tone. He walked over slowly, keeping his movements calm and non-threatening. "Lena," he said gently, "I'm here if you want to talk." Then in a voice barely audible she whispered, I don't know where to start. I thought maybe if I ended it, I would be free from all the fear. And when I tried to speak, when I tried to protect myself, I was punished. Not just once, over and over. I ran as soon as I could, but the memories, they followed me. I thought the accident would end it, she whispered, tears beginning to form. I didn't mean to survive. I didn't want to wake up. He sat beside her, careful not to touch her unless she allowed it. "Lena," he said softly, "you are alive now, and I will not let anything happen to you here. You don't have to carry this alone anymore." She wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, there could be safety, care, and kindness in her life. Over the next several days, Lena began to open up slowly. She spoke in fragments at first, telling Ethan about the small things she remembered from her life before the pain, the sound of rain on the roof, the taste of fresh bread, the way the sunlight fell across a field in summer. These memories were short and broken, but they brought a small light into her eyes. Ethan never rushed her. He allowed her to speak as much or as little as she wanted. He continued to involve her in ranch activities, giving her a sense of purpose and routine. They fed the animals together, tended the garden, and sometimes just sat in the quiet, listening to the wind rustling through the trees. These simple moments were the first steps toward trust, and each day Lena seemed a little less afraid to exist in the world around her. One evening, while the sun set behind the hills, Lena spoke again. I don't remember feeling safe like this before," she said quietly. "Even when I was a child, even when I was running, I never felt this calm." "Safety doesn't always come easy," he said. "Sometimes it's something we have to learn to accept piece by piece." Yet here it was, steady and quiet like the land around her. As the days turned into weeks, Lena began to trust Ethan more. She would share small details about her past, though she still kept the worst memories locked away. She spoke of the places she had been, the people who had tried to help but failed, and the moments of small beauty she had noticed even in the darkest times. Each story was a tiny victory, a step toward reclaiming her life. Ethan, for his part, continued to provide support without pressure. He understood that her healing would not be a straight path, and that trust could not be demanded. He also realized that by listening, by being present, he was helping her more than any medicine or advice could. Sometimes the simple act of being seen and heard was enough to begin mending a broken spirit. One afternoon, Lena wandered into the orchard where Ethan was pruning the apple trees. She watched him for a long time before speaking. Did you ever lose someone?" she asked hesitantly. Ethan paused, thinking of the people he had lost over the years, the mistakes he had made, and the regret he had carried. "Yes," he said quietly, "I have, and it taught me that life is fragile. That's why I cannot turn away from someone in need. Not now, not ever. For the first time, she felt a connection, a sense that someone had truly understood the pain of loss and the weight of survival. It was different from the pity or judgment she had experienced before. It was genuine, and it gave her hope. As the weeks passed, Lena's body and mind began to heal in small ways. She slept better, ate more, and even laughed quietly when something amused her. Yet Ethan knew the deeper scars would take much longer to fade. Healing was not a destination, it was a process, and it required patience, understanding, and consistent care. One night, as they sat by the fire in the living room, Lena spoke again. I think I can try," she said softly. "Try to live, to be here, to not be afraid all the time. Maybe life could still hold moments of peace, beauty, and even happiness." She had been through darkness that no one should endure, yet she had survived. And now, with someone she trusted by her side, she could begin to reclaim her life. And so, life at the ranch continued, slow and steady. The days were filled with quiet routines, small victories, and moments of connection. Lena's trust grew gradually, and with it, a fragile sense of hope. She began to see that while the past could not be changed, the present could be shaped by safety, kindness, and the steady presence of someone who cared. Ethan watched her carefully, proud of each small step she took. He understood that her journey was far from over, but he also knew that the fact she had chosen to live, to speak, and to trust again was a testament to her strength. And in those quiet evenings, as the sun set and the fire cast a warm glow across the room, they both understood that healing, though slow and sometimes painful, was possible. For Lena, the realization came gently but firmly. She had survived the darkness, and now, for the first time, she could start to see a future where fear did not rule her life. And for Ethan, it was a reminder that sometimes being present, listening, and caring quietly could make all the difference in helping someone reclaim their life. The days at the ranch grew warmer as spring approached. The air smelled of fresh grass and blooming flowers, and the world outside seemed alive with color and possibility. For Lena, each day brought small victories. She was eating more, laughing quietly at small moments, and even joining Ethan on longer walks through the fields. But beneath these glimpses of peace, the shadows of her past still lingered, quiet but persistent. Ethan noticed the tension in her sometimes, a sudden flinch at a loud sound, a hesitation when someone passed the house. He knew these moments were reminders of old fears, of memories that refused to fade. And while her body was healing, her mind still carried the weight of the pain she had endured. Healing was not a straight path, and he understood that every step forward could bring new challenges. One afternoon, Ethan decided to take her to the barn to work with the animals. "They're good company," he said gently. "They don't judge. They just need care, and they give it back in their own way." She began helping feed the horses, brushing their coats and cleaning the stalls. At first, her movements were careful, almost tentative, but over time she grew steadier. The animals responded to her presence, nuzzling her hands, and she felt a warmth she hadn't felt in years. Caring for them reminded her that life could be simple, that small acts of responsibility could bring meaning and calm. As they worked, Lena finally spoke about something she had never shared with anyone before. I thought I could never trust anyone," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Even when I was with people who tried to help, I expected pain. I thought kindness meant danger. I didn't know how to accept it. You've been hurt, and it makes sense that you feel this way. But you don't have to face the world alone anymore." In the following days, Ethan introduced more routines to help her build confidence and a sense of normalcy. He had her help in the garden, planting vegetables and flowers. At first, she hesitated, unsure if she could manage the work, but slowly she began to take pride in the results. She smiled more, spoke more, and even laughed quietly when something went wrong in the garden. These small victories reminded her that life could still hold joy, even after everything she had endured. Ethan also began sharing more of himself, telling stories about the ranch, about the people he had known, and the losses he had faced. He didn't force her to respond, only offered these glimpses into his life to show her that everyone carried burdens and that survival did not have to be lonely. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Lena sat on the porch with Ethan, watching the sky turn pink and orange. "I never thought I could feel safe," she said quietly. "Even now it's strange. I'm not used to it. But I think I'm beginning to trust." Ethan would stay with her, sitting by her side, holding her hands and reminding her that she was safe. These moments were difficult, but they were also crucial. She was learning that survival did not have to feel like punishment, that she could exist in safety and still be herself. Gradually, Lena began to open up more about her past. She spoke of the people who had hurt her, the situations that had made her feel powerless, and the times she had felt alone and abandoned. She did not share everything at once. The memories were too heavy, the pain too raw. But each story she told brought relief, a small release of the burden she had carried for so long. Ethan listened patiently, never interrupting, never judging. He understood that the act of being heard was powerful. Sometimes, just having someone acknowledge your pain could begin to heal wounds that medicine or time alone could not. And Lena began to realize that she could speak without fear, that her story mattered, and that it could be shared safely. One afternoon, while they were walking along a small stream near the ranch, Lena paused and looked at Ethan. I want to do more," she said. "I want to face the things I've avoided, even if it's scary. I want to, I don't know, live fully, not just survive. I'll be here every step of the way." One evening, as they sat by the fire, Lena finally allowed herself to speak about something she had feared for years. "I thought I would always be afraid," she said softly. "I thought my past would define me forever, but now I feel like maybe it doesn't have to. You have a choice every day to live your life the way you want, and you're already taking that choice." In the weeks that followed, Lena began to take more initiative. She would wake early, help with chores, and spend time with the animals. She laughed more openly, even shared small jokes with Ethan, and sometimes she would sit quietly, enjoying the calm of the ranch without feeling the constant weight of fear pressing on her chest. Ethan watched her carefully, proud of every step she took. He knew the healing process was far from over, but he also knew that the fact she was willing to face life again, to trust and engage with the world around her, was a victory. It was a reminder that resilience could emerge even after years of suffering, that hope could take root even in the darkest soil. One afternoon, as they worked together to repair a fence damaged in a recent storm, Lena paused and looked at Ethan. I think I'm ready," she said quietly. "Ready to face more of the world too, to face myself." "You've come so far, Lena. You've survived, and now you can start to live fully." She had learned that survival was not the same as living, and that she could choose to embrace life again. Ethan, sitting nearby, watched her with quiet satisfaction. He knew the journey was not over, but he also knew that Lena's courage, resilience, and willingness to trust were already powerful signs of healing. Together, they had taken the first steps toward a life where pain did not define them, where trust and care could coexist with the memories of hardship. And in that quiet night, surrounded by the warmth of the ranch and the gentle sounds of the animals resting, Lena realized something important. Healing was possible, not as a sudden event, but as a series of small, courageous steps. And for the first time, she felt ready to take those steps, to embrace life fully, and to reclaim the future she had always deserved. Spring had fully arrived at the ranch, and with it came a sense of renewal. The air was warm and carried the scent of flowers and fresh grass. The animals moved more energetically, and the farm seemed alive with life. Lena had changed in subtle but powerful ways. She walked with more confidence, laughed more freely, and even started talking about her future, a concept that had once seemed impossible to her. Ethan noticed the transformation with quiet satisfaction. She still had moments of hesitation, and sometimes old fears surfaced in sudden flinches or nightmares, but the change was undeniable. Lena had begun to reclaim her life, piece by piece, and the fragile trust they had built had become a foundation for healing. One morning, Ethan suggested a walk to the nearby hills, a place where the view stretched for miles and the sky met the earth in endless blue. "It's good to see how far we've come," he said gently. "Sometimes perspective helps you see your own strength." "I never thought I would feel ready to face anything," she admitted. "Even the thought of leaving the ranch before seemed impossible, but now I feel like I can take small steps, maybe even big ones. Whatever steps you take, I'll be here." In the weeks that followed, Lena made more decisions about her life. She spoke to professionals about her past, seeking guidance and support for the trauma she had endured. Each step was difficult, sometimes frightening, but she faced it with growing strength. She learned that acknowledging her past did not weaken her, it empowered her. By confronting her experiences, she was taking control rather than letting them control her. Ethan stayed by her side through every step. He did not push, did not judge, but offered guidance and encouragement. Sometimes she would falter, afraid of what she might feel or remember, but he reminded her gently, "You are stronger than you know. You've survived everything that was thrown at you. You can face this too. That's something to be proud of." She talked about moving to a nearby town to start a new life, finding work, and even reconnecting with distant family members she had lost touch with. Each thought was tentative, yet brave. She realized that surviving had been only the first part of her journey. Living fully, embracing her own choices, was the next. One evening, as the sun set over the ranch, Lena approached Ethan. Her voice was quiet but steady. "I think I'm ready to take the next step," she said. "I want to leave soon to start building my life. I want to thank you for everything you've done. You are the one who chose life every day." The ranch felt emptier without her presence, but he understood that this was the goal, to help her reclaim her life, not keep her in the safety of the ranch forever. As she turned to leave, she hesitated for a moment, looking back at Ethan. "Thank you," she whispered. "Not just for saving me, but for helping me find myself again. I will try to live the way I've always wanted." The wind blew through the open windows, carrying the scent of the ranch and the promise of a new beginning. As she drove down the winding road, she felt a mixture of fear and excitement, but mostly she felt hope, a hope she had not dared to feel for years. Ethan watched from the porch, his eyes following the car until it disappeared into the distance. He knew there would be challenges ahead for Lena, but he also knew that she was prepared, that she had the strength and courage to face them. She had survived darkness, faced her fears, and learned to trust and embrace life again. After she left, the ranch felt quiet but not lonely. Ethan returned to his daily routines, feeding the animals, tending the garden, and repairing fences. Yet there was a sense of fulfillment he had not experienced before. He had helped someone reclaim her life, and in doing so, he had been reminded of the power of patience, care, and trust. Weeks later, Lena called him from her new home. Her voice was bright, her tone full of hope. She told him about her small apartment, her new job, and the friends she was beginning to trust. She spoke of the sense of independence she was building and how she was finally beginning to enjoy life without fear. Ethan listened, feeling a deep sense of pride. "I knew you could do it," he said. "You've always had the strength inside you. I'm just glad you found your way." Lena shared her victories and challenges, and Ethan offered gentle encouragement. Though she was no longer on the ranch, the bond they had formed remained strong, a bond built on trust, respect, and the understanding that survival was not the end, but the beginning of something greater. Months later, Lena returned to the ranch for a short visit. She walked through the fields, watched the animals, and smiled at the familiar sights and smells. Ethan greeted her with the same calm kindness he always had. They sat by the fire together, sharing stories and laughter, and for a moment it felt like nothing had changed, yet everything had. Lena looked at Ethan and said softly, "I've learned something important. Surviving is just the first step. Living fully, trusting yourself, that's the real journey, and I couldn't have done it without you." She had faced her past, survived unimaginable hardships, and now embraced the future with courage and hope. She understood that life could still hold pain, but it could also hold joy, love, and trust. She had chosen life, and in doing so, she had found herself. Ethan watched her from the porch, knowing that sometimes saving someone meant giving them the space to choose their own path. Lena had chosen life, trust, and courage, and in that choice, both of them had been transformed. And so, the story ended not with an ending, but with a beginning. The beginning of a life reclaimed, a spirit renewed, and the quiet knowledge that even after the darkest times, hope could grow and strength could shine through.